Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of SuperFantaFi. This week's show, we talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the Season 4 premiere of Evil. Great season premiere. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. I've not seen the trailer for this season, and obviously I'm also getting to this season pretty late, because obviously there's quite a few episodes out at the time we're recording this, but either way, I'm wondering, is this season going to be a more heavier science fictional season just because of like the book that it's like, oh, like it was kind of like a science book pop-up we got for the pop-up book this season? Or is that just because of the particle accelerator? It's just that thematically for this episode it fit that. But I wonder, are we going a more science fictional route for the rest of the season? Maybe, maybe not, especially with the bin stuff. We'll have to wait to see, but let's start breaking the episode down. First and foremost, we have the opening where Kristen is there with Cheryl and Leland, and it's just like, oh, Leland's like, we're gonna have a baby, and then you have Kristen just walking away. She's at the elevator, and Leland's talking to her like, oh, we'll be able to have this baby, yada yada yada, and she bursts into laughter. I'm like, Kristen always had the most interesting reactions throughout this episode. It's funny, the episode, like, Kristen's line of dialogue was like, I don't think she had any lines of dialogue at the beginning of the episode until she starts laughing. And how does the episode end? The episode ends with her laughing. So, well, I mean, she actually has a line of dialogue at the end of the episode, but it's like everything came full circle in that same capacity. But yeah, Leland's like, yeah, we're going to have a baby in 38 days. And she's like, oh, Leland, you're screwed. Like, honestly, like, the fact of the matter is you don't think about, like, oh my God, you might be raising the Antichrist, but you still have to deal with a baby. Oh, what about the terrible two? She's even like, think about the Omen. The Omen didn't cover infancy, you know? So it's like, oh, the Omen storyline-wise jumped ahead when the kid was a little bit older. I think it's the bit, I've never seen the Omen. I've tangentially seen bits and pieces of the Omen and know some of the lore tangentially. Very, very, very little, but it's like, isn't a child Damien? Because isn't that where like the whole like Antichrist thing comes from, is the Omen? I don't know. Either way. So I love, like, Kristen always manages to kind of one-up Leland, and I think that's why he gets so petty a lot of times, is because, like, somehow she always, like, Uno reverses him, and he's just so upset because she walked away being like, nah, good on you, you idiot, go on, have a baby, it's fine, you know? And she goes home and immediately starts trashing all the, like, religious stuff that's scattered around the house, any crosses, any religious iconography, just to get rid of it, and putting up like, right, I need to get I've let, for too long in this show, I've let the religion kind of run me. It's like, no, like, I'm going back to science, you know, I'm going to be back to being a skeptic again. She kind of has been. That's never fully gone away, but she started to believe more and more as her show is going on, so she's trying to get rid of that, nip that in the bud. And then Cheryl shows up, and it's like, yeah, like, about what to say, Mom, cool, just, we have nothing to do with each other. Oh, this isn't me being emotional. Stay away from my house and never come here again. So, and then she proceeds to bang it out with Andy. I was like, hey, yo. I was like, yo, like, pull his pants. I was like, yo, that's so interesting, because you also rarely see, like, you know, there's like the cliche stereotype of, like, you know, the hot, like, oh yeah, like your significant other or whatever is like in an apron. And I mean, because part of me is almost, whatever the case may be, it's like that's the cliche, right? So to be like the roles reverse is kind of like wild in that moment. And it's also a reminder, like, I think every season since season 2 I had to be reminding myself, I'm like, right, the show was already crazy on CBS, but since coming to Paramount Plus, they went balls to the wall with the shit. And I'm like, yo, like, it's, I mean, I just wouldn't have been able to get away with something like that on CBS. Probably not, but it's like, they still got away with quite a lot. You're like, I can't believe this is on CBS, like, even in season 1. But it's like, yeah, just them banging it. I was like, yeah, what if the kids catch us? It's like, oh, we'll be kind of, it's kind of almost like, you know, quoting Kevin Hart here, you're going to learn today. It's like, hey, yo, that's insane. But Kristen's like, right, going forward, I'm going to stop believing in ghosts and stuff like that. Like, we did spend more time as a family. So Andy's kind of co-signing all that. It's all good. But I mean, obviously everything's not kosher between Kristen and Andy, because Andy, I guess they'd already laid the groundwork, maybe, because Andy started already getting suspicious of Kristen, being like, oh, you're going to be working with David. She's like, yes. And Ben, my 2 coworkers. Because it's like, at no point are you stressing about Ben? It's specifically David, even though Ben has actually been around our kids more than David has. But that's funny that Ben's not seen as the threat that David is. But I think that's because Leland's perspective. It's like there is a connection, deeper connection between Kristen and David. So of course you're going to be pulling on that thread. But I guess that was already kind of like something Leland had been instigating. But it's like, right, we need to drive a wedge because he says he wants to get Kristen's defenses down, which I'm like, how is that going to benefit you in the long run? Like, if anything, it's not going to push Kristen away from David. In fact, it's just going to cause more issues at home. But maybe it's like he's thinking like it might push her closer to David, and that in turn makes her want to stay away from him even more. Maybe that's the justification of why he thinks that's going to work in that regard, or maybe this whole situation is going to push David to be in a very unfortunate situation. He's going to do something that makes Kristen want to distance herself from. I don't know. It's poor Andy continues to be a pawn in a lot of stuff, and now he's being basically they're brainwashing him, incepting his brain like, right, why is the priest banging your wife? Why is David banging your wife? But Cheryl's like, no, we're supposed to be trying to get me back in the house. So literally at the same time Leland's doing what he's doing, Cheryl's like, I need to be back in the house. Your mother-in-law needs to be back in the house. Obviously we see Leland's messages got through. We haven't seen so far whether or not any of Cheryl's managed to come through or not. I guess it's supposed to be like one command at a time. You would think that would have confuddled some stuff, them both doing that, but I guess Leland's took precedent. Whatever the case may be, we'll see whether, like I said, any of Cheryl's got through. But Andy showing up, confronting David about like, oh, you're sleeping with my wife. At the same time, David's having to look and see Demon Kristen over there on the bed taunting him. You're just like, yeah, that is kind of the worst time to have to deal with that. It's like, yeah, you're sleeping with my wife. It's like, well, he did a demon version of your wife. It's like, how much of that's in his head and how much is that like an actual demon showing up disguised as Kristen that actually bang it out with him? That's a whole thing in itself. So, I mean, it seems like it's all in his head. So it doesn't count because it wasn't even really Kristen. It was something pretending to be Kristen. So it's a little different. So he ends up telling Kristen, because he was like, yeah, like I love he tried to beat around the bush. He's like, we're good, right? Like we're good as friends. She's like, yeah, I think we are, aren't we? Yeah, I think we're good. Good. Things with your husband. It's like, she's almost like, why the hell is my marriage coming up? It's like, oh, your husband kind of confronted me about sleeping with you. He what? She's like, yeah, I might have feelings with you, but it is the hypocritical thing of like, Andy, you've been going so long repeatedly throughout this entire series, before this series as well, but you've been going so long, and here you are, because her and Andy also had the disagreement, which is what she like feels like plays into this, that he wants her to cut back on work. He's like, right, once I've sold the business, once that person's come through and bought the business, I'm like, well, we know that was all BS, so I don't see that ever coming through. Maybe Leland and them will kind of like push that through just for the purposes of, okay, we will add more validity to this, but like I would assume the payment's never going to come through. You kind of want Kristen away from them anyway, so it probably would benefit you to actually give them the money so Andy can be like, cool, you can cut back on how much you're working and eventually wane away from that job. But, you know, this kind of made Kristen double down as, I mean, there's just so much setup and through lines you could see where this could potentially end up going, because Kristen sets a lineup as basically the only income person right now. You can't come in here and try to fuck with my job. And that's what you did. You tried to sabotage it, which is interesting parallels considering like there's this through line with the overarching particle accelerator storyline about sabotage as well. So that's just interesting. Andy does like say, oh, did you sleep with him? And she's like, no. Did you kiss him? And it's like, he's like, I can forgive you. And for her, she's like, it's that thing of like, well, they have kissed, but she's also not going to give Andy that win, because she knows that if she gives him that, all that's going to do is lead to him being more and more suspicious, and you have to deal with it. Like, he's going to like, he won't not believe that you haven't slept together. It's just, that's always going to be rattling off in his mind. So would Andy have naturally come to these conclusions if it wasn't for Leland incepting his brain? Like I said, the seeds were already there. I think just Leland's watering them and fostering them. But once again, how much of those seeds were just purely planted by Leland, and it's just, this was him watering them now. So there's that angle to it. Kind of staying on the Kristen front. she does have that situation where like her kids are quiet because Andy told them they talk too much, and the first one to speak has to clean up the room. And I love that she's set it up as an opportunity to, hey, so let's kind of change some things up. We are not going to be as religious going forward. We're not going to mass anymore. And then Lynn had a look on her face. I was like, what was that about? We'll get to that in a second. But then it's kind of like, oh yeah, also Grandma can't be here anymore. Anyone got any objections? I'm blanking on her kids' names now. I only know Lynn's name, remember Lynn's name because it came out this episode. But the daughter that has a tail thing going on, because I remember that. The one who's connected to Cheryl, she's the one out of them that has the best relationship with her grandmother. Because like none of the others really cared. She's the only one that raised her hand. Like, I'm the one that kind of has an issue with like grandma not coming. But it's like, yeah, like Cheryl's kind of gotten to her the most. So. Because none of the others have, like, the relationship with Cheryl like she does. So, but that was just kind of quickly overlooked. And it's like, yeah, so we're good now. And then we find out later on, Lynn went to go see Sister Andrea, and you're like, wait, what? Why? What's this about? And then all of a sudden stuff about being a nun. I'm like, where the hell is that coming from? I was like, oh, no wonder you had that look on your face. Your mom's kind of like, oh, we're not going to be religious going forward. Just when you're thinking about or questioning, she's like, hey, I want to know more. And it's like, she's like, oh, it's that David. Which I'm like, is Lynn going to start? Because they've all met David before. Like I said, out of anyone, they have the best relationship with Ben. But they don't really know David like that. I don't think they've had much interaction with David over the series. But it's like wanting to become a nun. I mean, it makes sense. You talk to another nun about that. I don't know if she's going to talk to David about this. Because she's probably worried that if she talks to David about it, he has a, obviously, co-worker with her mom. So it's like, you might talk to my mom about it. So that's probably why she went to a third party like Andrea. Andrea. For that purpose. So, but poor the sister's got a lot on her plate because not only does she have to deal with Lynn, she's got to deal with Kurt showing up being like, I did something bad, and she's just like, oh my god, I got to be David's spiritual guide through his visions and stuff, which he had a vision about like, oh, like the end of days, Babylon, 38 days. I was like, oh, interesting how 38 days is the same day that Kristen, baby's supposed to come into this world. And it's like, oh, well, the whole Babylon thing and the iconography he saw, the pictures he saw were like, oh, literally a baby being born. So it's like, oh, the Antichrist and stuff, right? It's like, okay, so that's where that's all correlating and connecting. So there's all of that. So a lot of moving pieces on that front. Obviously, what was Home Dude? Was it Father Ignatius? Is that his name? Because there's him, and then there's like the other Father LaRusso. I wonder, are we going to get a lot of Father LaRusso going forward? Or because like I think I said his name is Ignatius, but maybe it's not. But Home Dude is like, yeah, I'm not as much of a believer in all of this. But basically, this particle accelerator thing, there's some church people protesting it because they believe that basically the particle accelerator is going to open a portal to hell. He's like, I'm not quite sure what I believe, so you guys take lead on this and kind of determine whether or not there's something to this or not. So Ben, kind of obviously being the science guy, ends up being kind of like, not front runner, but, he understands a lot of this particle accelerator stuff. So they kind of get shown around. One of the people, well, there's a lot of weird stuff, like the lights flickering off like they did. I don't know, it's interesting too when you look at that whole, that section of everything. It's like the lights went off one by one for a while, and then it crossed over our characters, and then they kind of all went out at once. Like, just felt like that's weird. But then it came back on because it's like a backup generator. It's like show continues to always fuck with your head of like, at this point you're like, there's definitely supernatural stuff, but it's like that creepy, eerie, like ugh, nature of this show is just always so spectacular. What was that guy's name, Mateo? He's the one that, the end of the episode, but he's the one that brought up like, oh yeah, there's like a sinkhole opened up that might actually be a portal to hell. Who knows? We're actually not even sure what the bottom of that is. At the bottom of that hole, they just kind of built the particle accelerator around it. So him and some other people, the crew, were at, what was it, bin 33, and they saw like something in the smoke and heard growling. So it's like, what was it? And then you have the whole Kristen, because she's balancing like, right, just keep me on the skeptical side of things. Ben, oh, cool, like, you show me that the videos can be faked, so just next time something like that happens, show me that stuff immediately that it's fake. But it's like, David's not sure what to really make of it, so he ends up eventually going to see the hole at bin 33, but then he starts hearing Kristen's voice, and then there was like that centipede thing that came out of the hole, but like, we didn't get a really good look, but I was like, was that supposed to be, it looked like that was Kristen's head in its mouth. Like, they never gave you a front view of it. It's just like, you only saw it when it crawled out of the hole, and you're like, okay. I mean, like, all they did was put a tarp over a giant hole. I mean, I guess, like, not many people would be there at bin 33, but I'm like, why would you not immediately deal with that? Because they had made a remark about this other place that's like, oh yeah, like, this seems like it'd been recently reconstructed or whatever, so why was that dealt with, but you didn't feel that? Well, I mean, that hole goes down miles, but like, I don't know, covered it with something other than like just like a sheet of something, you know? But this all ties into Father LaRusso, who's like, I'm not even coming here from the demon side of things. He's kind of like, we're not even looking at it from that perspective. We're looking at this from the science/science fictional perspective of, yeah, this particle accelerator. Is there a possibility of it opening up a whole bunch of black holes and it swallowing the Earth? I'm like, the fact that you're hearing like people from the Vatican talk about that is fucking insane. That's where I'm like, this feels like this might be the more science fictional season. Like I said, this might just be this episode because of the particle accelerator stuff, but this might be like the major overarching kind of like thematic theme this season is science fiction maybe. But that was interesting, him having that perspective, and he's trying to talk to Ben of like, right, gold ions and stuff like that. It's like, should we be concerned? And Ben's like, well, it's not likely to happen. It's like, yeah, but there's a possibility. But it's like, yeah, but anything's possible. So Ben talks to the main dude who's running things like, is this something we should be concerned about? He's like, right, there's safety measures in place. And then the whole things go wrong, and Ben gets a beam through the face. He seems okay, but we saw like in the episode, like there's all this sudden flash of like, did he like absorb something? Like, was that some secret? I don't know what to make of that. I don't know if it's like, oh, basically the villains, the bad guys, like, that was supposed to, I don't know what the purpose of that would be. Like, could that be like, oh, it's supposed to go to the hole and let the demons know like what the plan is? Everyone in hell know the plan. But Ben got a like snapshot of it. I mean, it was all like quick like flashes, so Ben wouldn't think much of it, but maybe it's like buried somewhere in his subconscious. Maybe that's going to be a key factor to this. Well, it also plays into Ben's circumstances later on, because it seems like, hey, he's perfectly okay. He says he is, but then he has that sequence later on in the episode where he keeps seeing something out of the corner of his eye, and it's like, that's the creepiest shit, where it's just like, okay, you think you see something, and then you turn your head, and it's like, it's nothing, and you're like, okay, so what is this about? And Ben's hearing a voice. He even closes his eyes and reaches his hand out. It's like, when I don't look with my eyes, all of a sudden my other senses pick up the fact is I can hear you, I can touch you. And it's like, okay, it's like, why can't I see you? It's like, because you don't believe. And he's like, well, I believe in what I see, which is kind of the oxymoron and contradiction. The enigma here is that because he doesn't believe, he can't see this thing, but he can still hear it. So seeing is believing in everything. But he closes his eyes and we see the thing behind him. So is that something that's going to be following Ben forever throughout this season? Because he definitely didn't tell Kristen or David about it. He's kind of keeps saying like, right, I'm fine, I'm perfectly fine, but it's like, I mean, he's had his moments. Remember, was that last season, or was that season 2? I can't remember. Like the elevator thing when he was stuck. I want to say that was that? I can't remember if that was last season or not. That might have been last season. I don't remember. I mean, everyone on the team has had their experiences, so it makes sense, but just, I'm curious to see what this does for Ben this season. Like I said, he just pretends like everything's fine, there is no issue. So we never get any proper resolution to the particle accelerator storyline. We kind of rarely do, and I've talked about this time and time again. Like, a lot of these stories are just kind of left it's almost, this show can be slice of life-ish in the regards of like there are overarching stories, but some of these individual episodes, there are no proper conclusions to them. Sometimes like the Angel video thing came back. Well, the Angel on the video like was a season 1 thing that has subsequently popped up time and time again and gets referenced. But it's like some episodes are just kind of like it resolved to some extent. It might not be the happiest conclusion, but some have a conclusion and others just kind of left open and being like, are we going to revisit it? And some stuff we have and some stuff we haven't. So this being the final season and stuff, it's going to be interesting to see what else kind of pops up that we might end up revisiting from the previous 3 seasons or not. Even if it's not us properly revisiting it, maybe we'll just reference it or, you know, like I said, it's going to be interesting to see. But the guy, Mateo, who told them about the hole, he was going around the bins and he was making his way to 33 where it looked like he was struggling and fighting with something, and by the time they get there they find like the tarp isn't there, which David removed the tarp, but the tarp isn't there in general. So it's like, did he fall into the tarp and fall in? So it's like, did he fall in, did he jump in? Because up until that he was praying beforehand. So well, we know he is a religious person. That was kind of introduced earlier in the episode. And because David did see like there were these little stamps. They almost look like little club stamps of like a demon or something. There was like one on the elevator. There was one on one of like the pipes that they were like during the little like bins of the art particle accelerator. They were able to kind of like see another one. So you're like, but they kind of chalked that up to, oh, that was just like, you know, people messing around and stuff, because we got introduced to the sacrificial satanic stuff at the beginning. They said like that girl like quit, but Mateo was like, yeah, apparently she fell down that hole or got dragged into hell, but there's no confirmation on that. So because if you do look at the video, which they never made much point of it, but if you look at the knife when it goes into her, there is no blood on it, so it does seem faked. But just because something's fake doesn't mean it doesn't eventually lead to something real, you know? You fuck around enough, you find out, type of thing of like, oh, you were doing something satanic for like a joke or whatever, but it didn't probably turn into something real. Maybe not. But yeah, it's unclear whether Mateo was dragged in or whether he got pulled in. But even I noticed the claw marks before, so I was like, those weren't there before, were they? And then David points them out because there are claw marks and like a little blood. So it's like, David's like, yeah, I can't even properly conclude, you know, what happened. So it's like a Schrodinger's cat. He was both dragged in and he jumped in. It's like, yeah. So Ben's also got a perspective of like, well, you got to take some kind of risk because we don't know anything in the world. So yes, letting the particle accelerator do its thing is a minor risk. But it's like, yeah, but going back to the point of the safety measures is the issues, considering what happened to Ben, which wasn't supposed to be able to happen, but it did, so. Oh, and then we also find out that the particle accelerator is supposed to get turned on in 38 days from now. But so that does, once again, kind of play into the notion that there probably would, like, this is definitely going to be something we circle back to it before the end of the season, potentially, because it depends on how much of that 38 days is going to be the entire season, how much time is going to pass over the course. So, because it's kind of giving them a time limit, but who knows, like, oh, is that 38 days going to pass over the course of half the season, most of the season, all of the season, you know? So there's that. And then there's also the element of, once again, the baby situation, because David brings up the vision he had, and then Kristen laughs and is like, oh yeah, like my son is going to be born in 38 days, and Ben and David are looking at her, and then the episode cuts to the title end card. I'm like, so of course that's just how you're going to end the episode. So very interesting lead up and setup for this season. I want to circle back to the Lynn stuff. Once again, she's in between a rock and a hard place, because she like shows up and was like, oh yeah, I'm here at midnight, I was studying. She's like, it was with your boyfriend Ren, and she was like, yes, because it's like, I'd rather lie and say it was a boyfriend thing to admit what it really is, especially considering like, well, she'd already had her anti-religion side of things, and now on top of that, she's even more anti-religion now, even though she was kind of swayed to be a little more religious prior seasons, and now she's kind of back to being like, nah, I'm back to just focusing on science. I mean, because even David has his struggles with the whole notion of right, like, because him and Andrea are talking like, oh, do you believe in hell? She does, and he's like, I kind of have to. I guess it's more like, if I'm going to believe in there being a heaven and there's a God, I have to believe there is a hell. I think he's coming at it from that perspective, or at least I believe that evil exists. I believe that demons exist, so I kind of have to believe hell exists just by nature of being a priest and everything. But he also doesn't like the notion of like, right, there's a God who would send its people to hell, and she's like, he doesn't. They send themselves. So it's kind of that whole, once again, I always go back to the show Lucifer, like, you being trapped in hell is you. Your own guilt is what puts you there. But for David, he comes up with he has a conundrum of people he cares about, like a Ben and Kristen, don't believe in God, but he knows they're good people. So should they go to hell just because they don't believe in like heaven and God and stuff like that? So it's like, well, the answer to that is pray for them. So we'll see where things kind of go on that particular front too. It's just a lot, like I said, set up for this final season, and it kind of just makes you wonder, like, what is the conclusion of the show going to look like? This feels like this is going to be a show that has an actual open-ended ending. I feel like it's not going to be like I think it'll be satisfying on some fronts, but I think they're going to leave it so open-ended by the end. Like, I don't know, I might be surprised by the end. We get to the end of this, and it's like, nah, it's fully resolute. It's like, oh, like everything's settled. There's no like open-endedness. But this screams like a show that would have an open-ended ending. So we'll see how this all plays out, where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. Like I said, by this time, like, a lot of episodes have come out already, so got quite a lot of catch up to do. So. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.